I love the Beretta 92. I love the way it handles. I love the way it feels. I love the way the accuracy is just effortless and intuitive. But what if you could have a Beretta 92 that was a little leaner, a little sharper, a little more precise? What if you could have a Beretta 92 with a German-engineered sport-tuned suspension? Well, then you'd have a Walther P5. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Hipster Tactical. If I had to describe how the Beretta 92 shoots in a nutshell, I would say it's an intuitive shooter. And what does that mean? It feels very engaging as you're shooting it. The recoil impulse is informative and communicative. You feel like you know what the gun's doing, you know where your hits are going, and it's very easy to shoot accurately. And this gun, the Walther P5, is very similar. It has that same uniquely engaging characteristics to it, but to me, it feels sharper, it feels more precise, as I alluded to in the intro, and it's just kind of a racier, faster, more visceral experience when you're shooting the P5 versus the Beretta. So you may be wondering why am I comparing the P5 and the Beretta? They don't look anything alike, really. This gun's German, this gun's Italian. So what about them? What do they have in common that gives them this similar character in terms of how they shoot? So to answer that question, why these guns are similar, I've taken the barrels out of each of these guns, the P5 and the Beretta 92, and if you look, this is the Walther P5's barrel. You can see the locking block mechanism. This is what accomplishes the breech locking process for the Walther, and if you're familiar with the Beretta, it should look very similar because the Beretta has more or less the exact same system. And you'll notice that the Walther system is the block that they use is beefier and more robust. Beretta kind of simplified and streamlined the design when they copied it, essentially, and they made it more of a disposable part. So, the Beretta locking block lasts 15 to 20,000 rounds, and it's just, if you've shot that many rounds, you replace it, and it's fine. It continues to work. Whereas the Walther block was designed to last the life of the gun. So the Walther and the Beretta share similar operating systems. So why does that matter? How does that change how the gun handles? So, again, I'm not an engineer, but if you ever rack the slide on a Beretta, it just feels like it's on ball bearings. It feels like it's on glass rails, and the Berettas are just kind of known for that. But racking the slide on a P5 feels pretty much the same. Because there's not a tilting barrel, the barrel just stays straight in the Walther/Beretta system. You get less of a jerky sensation, less friction. The recoil impulse is just a little less distracting. So it allows you to just stay engaged, as you're shooting, as you're aiming, and as the shot is breaking. And it really makes for a unique sensation, and I think a really nice sensation when you're shooting the gun. The P5 shares those characteristics with the Beretta. What the Walther brings to the table is, as I was saying before, it just feels a little more precise, a little sharper, a little like, in my written review I used the analogy, I did some car analogies, but if you think of BMWs, you think of a 7 Series BMW, it's big, it's comfortable, but it still handles well, it still has a good feel to the way it drives. That's the Beretta 92. And I know the Beretta 92 is Italian, but I've never driven an Italian car, so we're going to stick with BMW for the purposes of this analogy. Whereas the P5 is more of a 3 Series, maybe an M3, and it's, it feels a little more bracing and visceral. It's, you're whipping it around corners, and it just feels a little faster and more engaging. And that's to me the point of difference with the P5. I just love the way this gun shoots. Aside from that locking block, which gives it that signature feel that it shares with the Beretta 92, it's a very different gun beyond that. So, if you look at the grip, it's single stack. It's a much thinner grip. It's the best feeling single stack that I know of. And I mean, the grip's not super thin. It's not as thin as the grip on like a SIG P239. So there's that. But in terms of just feel, it's so nice, and the trigger reach is just incredibly short. I mean, for a service gun, it's kind of unusual to find a trigger reach that short. I have pretty small hands, and it feels great. And there's enough of a contour, even though the grip is fairly thin because it's a single stack. Man, it just has enough support there for your hand, and it feels so good. And to add to that, the bore axis is very low, lower than what you find on a Beretta. And I don't have a Glock to compare it to, but it feels like it's at least that low. The bore feels like it's sitting very low in your hand, and the back strap doesn't have a big hump that like pushes your hand out. It has this nice, just kind of tight angle, comes down, and you really can get up into the gun. You can get close into the trigger, and as long as you take a firm grip, the gun just stays super flat when you're shooting, and it has that uniquely communicative feel that the locking block provides, and it's just such a great shooter. Even when you're shooting fast, I mean, the thing just sits low, and those 2 recoil springs just kind of even out the recoil. And you don't give up a ton of accuracy even when you're pounding rounds with this thing at a fast rate. Certainly, it's quite a bit more compact than the Beretta 92. It's still fat. It still has a fat slide like a Beretta 92. So, certainly it's a better carry gun than the 92, and I've tossed it in a holster and gone on walks and stuff. It's okay, but other guns with thinner slides I think are better from an inside the waistband perspective, but it's still a pretty handy size overall. It's a single stack, so it only holds 8 rounds, but capacity isn't my top concern. So, I look at more how the guns shoot and what they're like to shoot, and the P5 is an incredible shooter. And as far as the trigger, the single action trigger is really good. It feels, I guess, similar to a Beretta 92. It's got that nice kind of crisp snap to it. It's a little bit of a softer snap, so in that sense it's a little lighter, and I think it's a little better than what you find on the Beretta. The double action is okay. It feels real smooth up to a certain point, and then it's like Stack City. I mean, it just really stacks a lot, and then it breaks. But the thing is, the Walther P5 has an over travel stop. So if you watch some of my other videos when I talk about double action triggers, you know that over travel is kind of a barrier for me anyway, and I think a lot of people, to accurate shooting in double action, because when you're pulling through that heavy double action, especially if it stacks, you kind of jerks the gun once the hammer falls. But with the addition of the over travel stop, it kind of stops short of that, so you don't jerk the gun as much. So another gun I want to talk about in reference to the P5 is the Sig Sauer P6. If you're into guns, you probably know the history behind these two guns. But in, I guess, the early 70s, I think it was 1973, there was the terrorist situation at the Munich Olympics, and Germany decided they needed to, get it on their game when it came to their police handguns, because they were still using Walther P5s and 32 ACP, 7.65 millimeters. So, they put out a bid to design new police guns in 9mm Parabellum, and several different companies entered that competition. Walther, Sig Sauer, Heckler & Koch, and Mauser. And then the three that were eventually approved for service were the Walther P5, the Sig Sauer P6, and the H&K P7. And I don't have an H&K P7, unfortunately. I'm not sure I'll ever own one because they're like $3,000 now. But I have two of them. So yeah, and they're both really nice guns, and I love them both. But for me, the Walther is the superior shooter. I think the trigger's a little better. I can control it a little better. The bore axis is a little lower. It just feels a bit more intuitive to shoot. And that's not to say that the P6 or any of the German SIGs, they're all good, really nice shooting guns. If you watch my SIG P239 video, I love the way that gun shoots. And I shoot the P239 a little better than the SIG P6, which is, the civilian designation would be the P225. But the P6 is a really nice shooting gun, but to me, just the more purebred shooter is the P5. The SIG became the most widely adopted of those three police pistols, those single stack police pistols that came out of those trials in the 1970s. And it went on to kind of cement Sig Sauer's position in, the history of modern handguns, and the Sig Sauer line continues to this day, whereas this was kind of an evolutionary dead end, unless you count the Beretta 92. The Walther designed locking block system continues to live on in the Beretta 92s and the M9s and the M9 A1s and A2s and A3s and however many there are nowadays. But as I said before, this is basically a Walther P38 that originated in 1938, just before World War II. Externally, looks kind of like a giant PPK. I have to think that's deliberate on their part to kind of capitalize on that equity of the PPK. But internally, it's very much a modified Walther P38 or P1. The main difference is that the slide fully encloses the barrel, or almost fully encloses the barrel, minus this little protuberance here, and they moved the decocker down to the frame here in kind of a more Sig Sauer-esque position, and it's actually a really nice decocker. And they've got this kind of cool dual-purpose control here, and it locks the slide open, and it also functions as the slide release, and then you hit the same lever and you decock it, so that's kind of cool. It's actually two levers, but the button kind of hits, both levers at different times. It's clever engineering. It's cool. And another thing about the P5, it just feels so well engineered and so well built. The slide is so well made, so well machined. It literally resonates like a tuning fork, and it's crazy. Like, I'm sure you can hear that. Like, and I think maybe that's partly because it's not connected here in the front, so the sides can kind of resonate. But it's just so well made, so nicely made. And look at the barrel. Look at those support lugs on there. It's just I'd imagine, versus the P38, which had exposed barrel on the front. Even though the barrel's much shorter on the P5, I think it's 3.5 inches. But these support lugs here, I guess, offer more support, more muzzle support on this, so it probably makes it extremely accurate, maybe more accurate than what you find on a Walther P38, and even a Beretta 92, because even though the slide encloses the barrel on the Beretta 92, the tip of that barrel is unsupported. Another comparison I want to make is to Walther's later gun, the P88. This is my newest purchase. I kind of lucked out and got this for a good deal, but it was a mint condition P88 compact, and I love this thing. And to me, this is the nicest gun I've ever owned. I mean, it's just on another level in terms of its fit and finish and quality. Like the bluing is just beautiful. Like the slide is just super tight. It even, kind of, you can feel it lock into battery like that, and it's super tight. There's zero movement, zero play in the slide. This is almost like a custom 1911 level of a gun. It's just crazy accurate. Like it's, even when I'm not shooting that well, this thing is just insanely accurate. And I feel like if Wilson Combat made a double action, single action service pistol, it would be something like this. And the P5, while it just feels very well engineered and just kind of satisfyingly machiny, it's not quite on that level of just like almost custom quality, target grade. It doesn't have that quality to it as much, and I mean quality, that characteristic. It's very high quality. It's more of a functional feel. It's function over form. Not that the P5 is all, it's not functional. It is. It's very functional. But if you look here, you can see there's like machining marks. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see like heavy tooling marks on the slide, and the slide cuts here. You can see kind of the unfinished grain in the, here where they didn't bother to refinish the slide. And I just don't think, those cosmetic things mattered. Like it was made to do a job. It was made to do a job well. And the things that matter in terms of shootability and feel are really excellent in this gun. It harkens back to a time when, if you think about like the BMWs and the Benzes from the 80s, and they were about really good driving dynamics and something that performed well, but wasn't just about status. So that's kind of what I know I'm using a lot of car metaphors, but that's kind of what the P5 represents to me, like a first or second generation BMW M3. So let's say you actually want one of these things. I'm afraid it's kind of slim pickings. So these are fairly rare. They're not like obscure, like they're out there, but you're not going to find as many of these on the market as you do other guns like Berettas and SIGs, even like a SIG P6. There's way more of those out there on the market than you're going to find these. So they command a pretty heavy price. And it's also worth noting that I think there are only about 100,000 of these made, give or take, over the entire life of its production. And the biggest user of this gun was the Dutch National Police, and they had about 50,000. So half of all P5s ever made were used by the Dutch. And then in, I don't know, it was fairly recent, they switched to the PPQ, and they destroyed all 50,000 of their P5s. So right there, that we cut the amount of P5s in the world in half, and they didn't surplus them out, they just shredded them. So the price kind of automatically goes up for the P5s that are on the commercial market. If you look on Gunbroker, you'll find like new in box ones. They're going to run like well over $1,000, maybe even closer to $2,000. And then the P5 Compact, they actually made one that has a little bit shorter barrel than this. Those are astronomical. Those are, I've seen them go for like $3,000. If you find talking Gunbroker prices, if you find a used one like this, it's still probably going to go for around $1,000. That's what they're going for. I found this one on Arms List. Someone was selling it locally, and I was able to get it for like $700. If you can find one for that price, anywhere under $1,000 for even a fairly well used one, that's kind of what you're going to pay to get one of these. And I had always kind of wanted one of these things. It's just something that is unique and different, and it's the kind of gun I've always liked. So I saw that opportunity to get one. I didn't think I'd ever pay less than that. So it's a good deal, and it's been a really good gun, and I'm really happy I got it. If you do get one, unless you just pay out the ass for like a Safe Queen that's never been shot, you're going to get one with some miles on it, and that's what this one is. It was used by the BMI, and that is the German Ministry of the Interior. My P6 is from the BKA, which is the Bundeskriminalamt, which is like the German FBI. So I don't know how the Ministry of the Interior is different than that, but I guess it is a different agency. So they use these, and that's what this one is. So It's seen some rounds. It's been used, and one thing you'll find if you get any alloy framed, well, just about any alloy framed P38 derivative that's had some miles on it, that's seen some duty use, you will find some wear on the aluminum alloy frame, and especially the feed ramp there. And you can see the finish is basically worn off the feed ramp where, worn a track through the finish where the bullets glide up the feed ramp. So sometimes you see that and you're like, okay, is this gun worn out? Like, is it still going to feed right with that bare aluminum there? And in my written review, I get into some more detail on some of my thoughts about that. But suffice to say, I don't really think it's an issue. I haven't put thousands of rounds through this thing, but I've put a couple hundred rounds through it. I've shot different types of ammo. I've shot shitty remanufactured ammo. I've shot shitty remanufactured ammo through shitty pro mags that came with the gun. I have a factory mag too, but just to test it, I've mag dumped, crappy ammo for the crappiest magazines and different kinds of ammo, and shooting fast and shooting slow, whatever the case may be, it has never had a problem. So the gun still runs fine, and I tend to think that they didn't really expect that finish to stay on the feed ramp. The Germans tested these guns in excess of 10,000 rounds, for the trials of the police. So I think it's likely that these, bare aluminum feed ramps were seeing plenty of rounds and they function just fine. The Bundeswehr, the post-war German military, used the alloy frame P1s, same kind of thing. They were using fairly high pressure NATO rounds, and again, I think the wear in the feed ramp is just kind of a reality of using these alloy frame Walthers, and the guns function fine with that. So at least that's been my experience. You don't find a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, the people that use these guns on duty, like SIGs and Glocks, like you can go on forums and people have used these guns, extensively, that you can talk to about how they worked, whereas, these guns were used 30 years ago and in different countries, so it's hard to have that kind of knowledge here available. So if you've used these guns in your life, or you've talked to people who have, let us know in the comments. I'm sure, for those of us who have these older guns, it would be nice and reassuring to know that the gun's still going to function as it was intended to. And in my experience so far, I don't see this as really an issue. It's just how the guns function, and that's what you can expect if you shoot one of these guns. So in conclusion, the Walther P5 is one of my most favorite guns. It's in my top few of guns just that I enjoy shooting, and right up there with the Beretta 92. Compared with the P88, I love shooting that gun too. It's still, the P5 just has that feel to it that is just unique, I think, because of the locking block system and because it functions differently. And if I had to pick just in terms of shooting enjoyment, I think maybe I like shooting the P5 more. I think the P88 is probably more accurate at the end of the day, but they're both great guns. I love them both, and I love shooting them both, and I'm proud to own both of them. That is my resounding endorsement of the Walther P5. Like I said, if you can find one for a reasonable price, definitely grab one. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And if you want some more just detail and texture on some of the stuff I talked about, check out the written review on hipstertactical.com. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'm Matt, and this is Hipster Tactical.